The crowd erupted in thunderous applause as Emma Porter gracefully stepped onto the wooden stage of The Tonight Show. The famous actress beamed at the audience, her signature smile lighting up the studio. But as she recounted the story of learning to milk a cow on a struggling farm in rural Vermont, the host's jaw dropped. "Wait, so you're telling me this farmer had no idea who you were? For an entire month?" Emma's eyes sparkled with genuine joy. "Not a clue. And it was the most authentic human connection I've had in 15 years. That's why I'm building the retreat there, to share what Andrew taught me about real life." Meanwhile, 500 miles away, Andrew Bennett sat on his porch, staring at the check in his weathered hands. Still unable to believe that the clumsy tourist who couldn't even milk Bessie properly was about to save everything he was about to lose. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Andrew Bennett's boots squelched in the mud as he trudged across the barnyard. The late April rain had finally stopped, but it had left his already struggling farm in Vermont a soggy mess. At 43, Andrew felt twice his age most mornings. The constant financial worry had etched permanent lines around his eyes and across his forehead. His once robust frame had grown leaner over the past 3 difficult years. Though the physical labor kept him strong despite the stress, the farm had been in the Bennett family for 4 generations. His great-grandfather had cleared the land, his grandfather had expanded it, and his father had modernized it. Andrew had inherited not just the 100 acres and the herd of dairy cows, but also the crushing weight of expectation that came with being a Bennett. The family name meant something in Riverdale County, or at least it used to before milk prices plummeted and expenses soared. Inside the weathered red barn, the familiar smell of hay, manure, and sweet feed greeted him. The dairy cows shifted in their stalls, their large brown eyes following his movements. These animals were more than livestock to Andrew. They were partners in his increasingly desperate enterprise. Each had a name, a personality, a history he knew by heart. "Morning, Bessie," he said, pausing to scratch the Holstein between her ears. Bessie was his oldest and most reliable milker, a gentle giant who had produced more milk over her lifetime than any cow he'd ever owned. Forecast says we might get some sunshine today. About time, don't you think?" Andrew talked to his cows more than he talked to people these days. Since his wife Karen had left 3 years ago, taking their teenage son Jason with her to Boston, human conversation had become a luxury. She tried to stick it out, had promised, for better or worse, like she meant it, but the constant struggle had worn her down. Andrew couldn't blame her. Watching your husband fight a losing battle day after day took its own toll. "Can't fight the economics," was what his neighboring farmer, Peter Calloway, had said last week when he announced he was selling out to a developer. 30 years I've been at this, Andy. 30 years of dawn milkings and midnight calvings, and what have I got to show for it? A mountain of debt and arthritis in both knees." Peter wasn't the first. Over the past decade, Andrew had watched family farms disappear one by one across the rolling hills of Vermont. The beautiful countryside that had sustained generations was being carved up into vacation homes and hobby farms for gray, wealthy city folk who wanted a taste of rural life on weekends. Andrew had been approached too. A real estate developer from New York had left 3 messages on his answering machine just this week. The offer was tempting, a way out from under the crushing debt with enough left over to start something new. But every time Andrew considered it, he'd walk outside, look across the fields his ancestors had cultivated, and the words would stick in his throat. This morning, as he prepared for milking, Andrew's mind was on the bank notice that had arrived yesterday. 6 months behind on the mortgage payments. Final warning before foreclosure proceedings. The words had blurred before his eyes as panic rose in his chest. He had tried everything to keep the farm afloat. He'd cut expenses to the bone, taken odd carpentry jobs in the off-season, even started selling artisanal cheese at farmers markets to supplement the dwindling milk check. It wasn't enough. The math was cruel and simple. His costs exceeded his income, and the gap kept widening. Andrew was so lost in these grim thoughts that he didn't hear the car approach. It wasn't until Rufus, his aging border collie, began barking that he became aware of a visitor. Setting down the milking equipment, he walked to the barn door and looked out across the yard. A sleek silver rental car had pulled up beside his battered pickup truck, looking as out of place as a spaceship in a cornfield. A woman was emerging from the driver's side, dressed in what appeared to be expensive hiking gear, though it looked brand new and impractically clean. Large sunglasses covered half her face despite the overcast day, and her dark hair was tucked under a baseball cap. Andrew frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone, and tourists rarely found their way to his remote farm. The nearest hiking trail was 5 miles away. "Can I help you?" he called out, not bothering to hide the wariness in his voice. The woman turned toward him, seeming startled by his presence despite having driven up to his farm. "Oh, hello," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of refinement that immediately identified her as not from around here. "I'm so sorry to intrude. I think I'm a bit lost." Andrew stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag tucked in his back pocket. As he approached, he noticed she was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her early 30s. There was something vaguely familiar about her, but he couldn't place it. "Where are you trying to get to?" he asked, keeping a respectful distance. "I was headed to Green Mountain Lodge," she said, pulling out a map that looked like it had been printed from the internet. "The GPS sent me down this road, but I think I made a wrong turn somewhere." Andrew nodded. It wasn't the first time. "Yeah, satellite navigation doesn't work so well out here. The lodge is about 15 miles north. You need to go back to the main road, then take a left at the old mill." The woman glanced back at her car, looking uncertain. "Would you mind showing me on the map? I'm terrible with directions." Despite his schedule and worries, Andrew found himself agreeing. There was something appealingly vulnerable about the woman, a genuine helplessness that triggered his inherent need to assist. As he leaned in to look at her map, she removed her sunglasses, revealing striking hazel eyes. Again, Andrew felt that nagging sense of recognition, but he pushed it aside. "You take this road back," he explained, tracing the route with his finger. "Then left here, and the lodge will be on your right after about 12 miles. Can't miss it." "Thank you so much," she said with a smile that transformed her face. "I've been driving in circles for almost an hour." Andrew nodded and was about to turn back to his chores when the woman spoke again. "This is a dairy farm, isn't it?" she asked, looking around with evident curiosity. "That it is. 4th generation," Andrew replied, unable to keep a hint of pride from his voice despite the farm's precarious situation. "I've never been on a real working farm before," she admitted, her interest seeming genuine. "Everyone back home," she paused. "Everyone I know buys their milk from stores without thinking about where it comes from." Andrew found himself warming slightly to this lost tourist. At least she acknowledged the disconnect most people had from their food sources. "Well, it doesn't appear by magic in those cartons," he said with a slight smile. "It's hard work, dawn to dusk." "Are you milking the cows now?" she asked, peering toward the barn with newfound interest. "About to start the morning milking, yes." The woman hesitated, then asked with unexpected eagerness, "Would it be terribly intrusive if I watched? Just for a minute or two? I've always wondered how it's done." Andrew's first instinct was to decline. He had work to do, problems to solve, and no time for playing tour guide to a lost city woman. But something in her expression, a childlike wonder and curiosity, gave him pause. When was the last time anyone had shown genuine interest in his daily life? "I suppose you could watch for a bit," he conceded. "But you'll need different shoes. Those fancy hiking boots will be ruined in the barn." She looked down at her expensive footwear, then back at him with a determined expression. "I don't mind. They're just shoes." That casual dismissal of what must have been $200 boots told Andrew more about her financial situation than any words could have. This was someone who had never worried about money the way he did every waking moment. "Suit yourself," he shrugged, turning toward the barn. "But stay behind me, and don't touch anything without asking first. These are working animals, not pets." "Of course," she agreed eagerly, following him with carefully measured steps, clearly trying to avoid the worst of the mud. Inside the barn, The woman's eyes widened as she took in the scene. The row of Holstein cows in their stalls, the gleaming stainless steel of the milking equipment, the sweet smell of hay mingling with the earthier odors of a working barn. "It's so real," she breathed, as though she'd stepped into another world. Andrew couldn't help but chuckle. "As opposed to what? An imaginary farm?" She blushed slightly. "I just meant, it's not like the sanitized version you see in movies or children's books. It's authentic." Authentic. That was a word Andrew hadn't heard applied to his hardscrabble existence before. To him, it was just life, and lately, a pretty difficult one. "Well, authentic comes with authentic smells, so brace yourself," he warned as he approached Bessie's stall. "This is Bessie. She's 14 years old and the most reliable milker in my herd." The woman approached cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance from the large animal. "She's beautiful," she said softly. Andrew glanced at her, surprised. Most people didn't see beauty in dairy cows, only utility. But looking at Bessie through a newcomer's eyes, he could appreciate her quiet dignity, her gentle brown eyes, the distinctive pattern of black and white markings that was uniquely hers. "She is, at that," he agreed, patting Bessie's flank. "Smart too. Knows her name and her place in the hierarchy. Cows are a lot more intelligent than people give them credit for." He began preparing for milking, explaining each step to his unexpected visitor. "Modern dairy farms use mechanical milking machines, but I still hand milk a few of the older cows like Bessie. They're used to it. And at their age, I don't like changing their routines." "You can milk them by hand? The whole bucket?" the woman asked, clearly astonished. "Been doing it since I was 8 years old," Andrew replied, setting the stainless steel bucket underneath Bessie. "My father wouldn't let me use the machine until I proved I could do it the old-fashioned way first," said it taught patience and respect for the animal. As Andrew washed Bessie's udder with warm water and dried it with a clean cloth, he continued his impromptu lesson. "You have to clean the udder first to prevent infection and keep the milk clean. Then you apply a little salve to keep the teats from chapping." The woman watched with rapt attention as Andrew positioned himself on the small stool beside Bessie. His large, calloused hands encircled two of the teats, and with practiced motions, he began to express the milk, creating a rhythmic sound as it hit the metal bucket. "It looks so easy when you do it," she observed. 15,000 hours of practice will do that," Andrew replied with a slight smile. "It's all in the technique. You squeeze from the base to the tip, not just pulling." To his surprise, the woman moved closer. Would it be possible for me to try?" Andrew hesitated. Teaching a complete novice to milk was time-consuming, and Bessie wasn't always patient with strangers. But the genuine interest in the woman's eyes made him reconsider. "I suppose you could give it a try," he said finally. "Bessie's pretty tolerant of beginners." He stood up from the stool, gesturing for the woman to take his place. "First, you'll need to wash your hands thoroughly. There's a sink over by the wall." She followed his instructions, scrubbing her hands with the strong soap he used before and after milking. When she returned, she eyed the stool with determination. "I'm Emma, by the way," she said suddenly, as if just realizing they hadn't introduced themselves. "Andrew Bennett," he replied. "Now, Emma, sit with your right shoulder against Bessie's flank. That lets her know you're there and keeps you in a safe position." Emma carefully positioned herself according to his instructions, her movements tentative but determined. "Good. Now take 2 teats, 1 in each hand. Encircle them at the base, where they meet the udder." Andrew demonstrated in the air. "Then squeeze gently while pulling down. The key is to close your fingers in sequence, like a wave, starting with your thumb and forefinger." Emma attempted to follow his guidance, her slender fingers encircling Bessie's teats awkwardly. She squeezed, but nothing happened. "I don't think I'm doing it right," she said, a note of frustration in her voice. "You're being too gentle," Andrew observed. "You won't hurt her." Firm but steady pressure. Emma tried again, her face a mask of concentration. This time, a few drops of milk appeared, landing in the bucket with tiny pings. "I did it!" she exclaimed, with such genuine delight that Andrew couldn't help but smile. "That you did," Now keep going. You need to establish a rhythm. For the next few minutes, Emma struggled to develop any semblance of efficiency. Her technique was clumsy, her rhythm non-existent. Milk occasionally squirted in unexpected directions, once hitting her directly on her expensive jacket. Rather than being upset, she laughed, a rich, genuine sound that echoed in the barn. Andrew found himself chuckling as well. Maybe dairy farming isn't your calling. I'm determined to get better, Emma insisted, wiping milk from her jacket. Show me again? Andrew demonstrated the technique once more, his experienced hands drawing steady streams of milk from Bessie. It's like playing piano. You need to develop muscle memory. Emma watched intently, then tried again. This time, she managed a somewhat steadier flow, though still painfully slow. There you go, Andrew encouraged. You might get a tablespoon by lunchtime at this rate. Emma shot him a playful glare. Rome wasn't built in a day, Farmer Bennett. No, but my cows need to be milked twice a day, tourist Emma, he retorted, surprised at how easily they'd fallen into friendly banter. After a few more minutes, Andrew gently reclaimed his position. I should finish up here. Bessie's a good sport, but she likes her routine. Emma relinquished the stool, flexing her fingers. My hands are already sore. I can't imagine doing this for hours. You build up strength over time, Andrew explained, resuming the milking with practiced efficiency. My hands were cramping constantly when I first started. As he worked, Emma asked questions about the farm, the cows, the process of milk production. Her interest seemed genuine, and Andrew found himself sharing more than he would have expected, explaining the economics of modern dairy farming and the challenges small operators like himself faced. The big industrial farms can produce milk so cheaply that it's driving prices down below what it costs us to produce it, he explained. Add in rising feed costs, equipment maintenance, veterinary care. It's a constant battle to break even. That's terrible, Emma said, her brow furrowed in concern. Don't you get subsidies or something? Some, but not enough to offset the losses, Andrew replied, finishing up with Bessie and moving to the next cow. Every year, more family farms like mine go under. Land gets sold to developers, and another piece of agricultural heritage disappears. Emma followed him, careful to stay out of the way while remaining close enough to observe. Is your farm in trouble? She asked bluntly. The direct question caught Andrew off guard. He wasn't in the habit of discussing his financial problems with strangers. But there was something disarming about Emma's straightforward curiosity. Let's just say I'm exploring options, he said carefully. The bank isn't known for its patience. Before Emma could respond, a sharp ring broke the relative quiet of the barn. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a sleek smartphone, glancing at the screen with a flicker of alarm. I'm so sorry. I need to take this, she said, already stepping toward the barn door. Thank you for the milking lesson. It was illuminating. Andrew nodded, somewhat bemused by her sudden departure. He returned to his work, expecting to hear the sound of her car starting up. Instead, after several minutes, Emma reappeared at the barn entrance. Everything all right? He asked, noting a new tension in her posture. Yes, fine, she replied quickly. That was my assistant. I've been reminded that I have an appointment at the lodge this afternoon. Andrew nodded, wondering what kind of tourist traveled with an assistant. Well, you better get going then. Remember, back to the main road, then left at the mill. Right, yes. Emma hesitated, seeming reluctant to leave. I really appreciate your taking the time to show me around. It's been the most interesting part of my trip so far. Glad to provide some entertainment, Andrew replied with a slight smile. Not every day a city girl gets to milk a cow. Emma laughed, the sound genuine despite her evident hurry. Definitely a first for me. I'd like to, that is, would it be okay if I came back sometime? Maybe see more of the farm? The request surprised Andrew. People like her, wealthy tourists passing through, didn't usually seek return visits to working farms, but her interest had seemed sincere, and he found himself nodding. Sure. I'm here most days, dawn to dusk. Emma's face brightened. Great! I'm staying at the lodge for a few weeks. Maybe I'll stop by again soon. She glanced at her watch. I really do have to run now. Thank you again, Andrew. She hurried out, and moments later, Andrew heard her car start up and crunch down the gravel driveway. Shaking his head at the strange interlude, he returned to his milking, the day's problems flooding back now that the distraction was gone. City people? He muttered to Bessie, who flicked her tail in seeming agreement. Fascinated by the simplest things we do every day. Yet as he worked through his morning chores, Andrew found himself thinking about Emma's genuine delight at learning to milk, her thoughtful questions, and the way she'd laughed at herself when the milk sprayed her expensive clothes. There had been something refreshing about her enthusiasm, a reminder of what it was like to see his daily life as something other than a grinding struggle. 3 days later, Andrew was repairing a fence line when he heard a vehicle approaching. Looking up, he recognized the silver rental car bumping along the rutted farm road. He straightened, curious despite himself about the return of his unusual visitor. Emma parked and emerged from the car, dressed more appropriately this time in jeans, rubber boots, and a flannel shirt that still looked too new but at least suggested she'd thought about farm conditions. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the same baseball cap and large sunglasses. "You came back," Andrew observed as she approached, trying to keep the surprise from his voice. "I said I would," Emma replied with a smile. "I brought coffee. I wasn't sure how you take it, so I got an assortment of cream and sugar." She held up a cardboard tray with 2 cups from an expensive coffee shop in the nearest town. The thoughtful gesture caught Andrew off guard. When was the last time someone had brought him anything? "Black is fine," he said, accepting the cup with a nod of thanks. "What brings you back to Bennett Farm?" "More milking lessons?" Emma laughed. "Maybe later. Actually, I was hoping to see more of the operation. If you're not too busy," she added quickly. "I don't want to interrupt your work." Andrew glanced at the fence he'd been mending. It had already been broken for 3 days. Another hour wouldn't matter, and the genuine interest in this stranger's eyes was hard to resist. When was the last time anyone had wanted to know about what he did? "I suppose I could show you around," he conceded. "Though, I'm not sure what's so fascinating about a struggling dairy farm." "Everything," Emma said with unexpected intensity. "This is real life, real work. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my W?" She stopped herself, taking a sip of coffee before continuing. "In the circles I usually move in, everything is artificial, constructed for effect. There's something so refreshing about a place where things are exactly what they appear to be." Andrew raised an eyebrow at her earnestness, but nodded toward the main part of the farm. "Well then, let me show you exactly what we appear to be." Over the next hour, Andrew gave Emma a tour of the Bennett farm. He showed her the milking parlor where most of the herd was processed, explaining the equipment and the rigorous sanitation protocols. He walked her through the barn where calves were housed, introducing her to a week-old Holstein heifer that had Emma cooing in delight. They visited the feed, storage facilities, the equipment shed with its aging tractors, and finally ended up at the cheese-making building, a recent addition that Andrew had built himself. "This is my attempt at diversification," he explained, showing her the small but immaculate space where he produced artisanal cheeses in limited quantities. "Commodity milk prices are killing us, so I'm trying to create value-added products, sell direct to consumers at farmers markets, that sort of thing." Emma examined the aging shelves where rounds of cheese were carefully stored. "You made all these?" "Everyone," Andrew confirmed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "Took courses at the agricultural extension, converted this old storage building, got all the health department certifications. It's small scale, but the margins are better." "May I?" Emma asked, gesturing to a sample plate he had prepared for a potential restaurant client who had canceled. "Help yourself." She tasted each variety thoughtfully, her expressions revealing genuine appreciation. "These are incredible," she said finally. "The sharp cheddar especially. I've had cheese at some of the finest restaurants in the world, and this is exceptional." The praise, delivered with such evident sincerity, warmed Andrew more than he would have expected. "Thank you. I'm still perfecting the recipes, but I think we're getting there." "You absolutely are," Emma insisted. "Why aren't these in specialty shops in Burlington or Boston? You could charge premium prices for this quality." Andrew sighed. the familiar weight of reality settling back on his shoulders. Distribution is the challenge. I don't have the connections or the capital to scale up properly. The equipment to ramp up production costs more than I can currently borrow. Emma nodded thoughtfully, continuing to sample the cheese. Have you considered alternate funding sources? Crowdfunding? Investors? Investors want scalability and exit strategies, Andrew replied, leaning against the work table. I'm just trying to keep the family farm afloat, not build the next Cabot. For a moment, Emma seemed about to say something more, but instead asked about his family. Andrew found himself sharing the story of the Bennett farm's history, his own childhood growing up in these fields, and eventually, the painful departure of Karen and Jason. She tried, he said, surprising himself with his candor to this near stranger. But watching someone you love fight a losing battle year after year, it wears on you. She deserved better than to go down with my sinking ship. Do you still see them? Emma asked gently. Jason comes for 2 weeks in the summer. He's 16 now, more interested in computers than cows, but we make it work. Andrew smiled faintly. Karen and I are civil. She remarried last year. Nice guy, insurance executive, stable job, regular hours, predictable income. Everything I couldn't provide. The bitterness he'd expected to feel had faded over time into a resigned acceptance. Karen had made the rational choice for herself and their son. Andrew couldn't fault her for that, even if the loss still ached during the long, quiet evenings in the farmhouse. Emma listened without interruption, her expression compassionate but not pitying, for which Andrew was grateful. When he finished, she surprised him by sharing a bit of her own story, though Andrew noticed she remained vague about specific details. I understand feeling trapped in a life that's no longer working, she said, her gaze distant. My career, it's successful by most measures, but increasingly empty. Everything is scheduled, managed, filtered through layers of people. Nothing feels authentic anymore. What do you do? Andrew asked, realizing he still knew almost nothing concrete about his visitor. Emma hesitated. I'm in entertainment. Acting, primarily. Anything I would have seen you in? He asked with mild curiosity. Another pause. Possibly. I've done some film work, some television. Before Andrew could inquire further, his ancient flip phone rang. Checking the number, he grimaced. I need to take this. It's the bank. Emma nodded understandingly. I'll wait outside. Andrew answered the call, listening with growing tension as his loan officer explained that the foreclosure timeline was being accelerated. The bank had received an offer from a developer interested in the property and was eager to recoup their investment. He would have 30 days, not the previously discussed 6 months. By the time the call ended, Andrew's hands were shaking with a mixture of rage and despair. 30 days. After 4 generations, the Bennett farm would be lost in 30 days. When he emerged from the cheese building, Emma was waiting, concern evident on her face. Bad news? The worst, Andrew admitted, too shell-shocked to maintain his usual reserve. 30 days until foreclosure. The bank's got a developer lined up to turn this into vacation homes or some damn thing. Emma's expression shifted to one of genuine distress. There must be something you can do. A legal challenge? An emergency loan? Andrew shook his head. I've explored every option. The numbers just don't work. He gestured around at the farm. This way of life is dying. I'm just the latest casualty. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between them. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice unusually hesitant. What if you could reimagine the farm? Not abandon it, but adapt it to modern realities? Andrew looked at her questioningly. Your land is beautiful, your cheese is exceptional, and you have an authentic connection to this place that can't be manufactured. She continued, warming to her theme. Have you ever considered agritourism? Farm stays? Experiential tourism is huge right now. People paying premium prices to disconnect from technology and reconnect with where their food comes from. Andrew had considered it briefly, but the startup costs had seemed prohibitive. It would require significant investment. Guest accommodations, insurance, marketing. But the potential returns could save the farm, Emma pressed. And you wouldn't need to stop being a dairy farmer. In fact, that would be the main attraction. There was something in her intensity that gave Andrew pause. You seem to have given this a lot of thought for someone who just learned to milk a cow 3 days ago. Emma smiled, a little sheepishly. I've been researching since I met you. The concept is sound. People, especially wealthy urbanites, are hungry for authentic experiences. What could be more authentic than learning traditional farming skills from a fourth-generation farmer? The idea wasn't entirely without merit, Andrew had to admit. He'd read about successful farm stays in the agricultural journals. But the timing and finances still presented insurmountable obstacles. Even if I wanted to pursue this, he said, I don't have 30 days to transform a working dairy farm into a tourist destination, let alone the capital to make it happen. Emma bit her lip, seeming to make a decision. What if capital wasn't the issue? What if you had a partner? Andrew stared at her. What are you suggesting? A business proposition, Emma said carefully. I've been looking for an investment opportunity, something meaningful and tangible. I have resources I could contribute. You have the farm, the knowledge, the authenticity. Together, we could create something that preserves this place while making it economically viable. The offer was so unexpected that Andrew could only shake his head in disbelief. You don't even know me. You certainly don't know enough about dairy farming or this property to make that kind of offer. I know enough to recognize potential, Emma countered. And I'm a quick study. Look, take some time to think about it. I'm at the lodge for another 2 weeks. We could discuss details, draw up proper agreements with lawyers present. Andrew was about to refuse outright when he looked around at the farm that had been his family's legacy for generations. 30 days until it all disappeared. What did he have to lose by at least considering an unlikely lifeline? I'll think about it, he said finally. But I have to be honest, it sounds too good to be true. People don't just show up and offer to invest in failing dairy farms. Emma smiled, relief evident in her expression. Sometimes life surprises you. I'll come back tomorrow. If that's all right, we can talk more specifically about what might be possible. As she prepared to leave, Emma hesitated, then impulsively pulled out her phone. I just realized we have no way to contact each other. Would you mind if I get your number? They exchanged contact information, Andrew giving his landline since his cell service was notoriously unreliable. As Emma drove away, he stood in the yard, trying to process what had just happened. A stranger, a tourist who'd stumbled onto his farm by accident, was proposing a business partnership that might save everything he stood to lose. It was absurd, likely to come nothing. And yet, as he returned to mending the fence, Andrew found himself considering possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to contemplate in years. That evening, curiosity got the better of him. Emma had mentioned she was an actress in film and television. Sitting at his ancient desktop computer, Andrew performed a search for recent actresses named Emma. The results were overwhelming, with dozens of possibilities. Without more information, he had no way to narrow it down. He tried to recall any defining characteristics, any clues she might have dropped. She'd mentioned an assistant, suggesting some level of success. She'd spoken of feeling trapped by schedules and management, implying a career of some significance. And those large sunglasses and cap suddenly seemed less like casual accessories and more like a deliberate attempt to avoid recognition. On a hunch, Andrew searched for Emma, actress famous. The top results included several Emmas, but one name appeared repeatedly: Emma Porter, the Hollywood star whose latest film had grossed over $200 million. Curious. He clicked on images and found himself staring at a glamorous red carpet photo of a woman who, despite the makeup and styled hair, was unmistakably his awkward milking student. Holy hell. Andrew muttered, sitting back in his chair. Emma Porter, one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, had spent the morning touring his dilapidated farm and making amateur attempts at milking Bessie. The absurdity of it made him laugh out loud, startling Rufus, who had been dozing at his feet. No wonder she'd been so vague about her career. No wonder she wore the cap and sunglasses. Her face had been on craft, magazine covers and movie posters for the past decade. Andrew's amusement faded as he considered the implications. What was Emma Porter doing in rural Vermont? And more specifically, why was she proposing to invest in his failing farm? Was this some kind of elaborate research for a role? A wealthy person's passing fancy? Or something more genuine? He thought back to their conversations, trying to detect any insincerity or hidden agenda. Whatever her motivations, her interest in the farm and its operations had seemed authentic. Her distress at learning about the imminent foreclosure had appeared genuine. And the cheese, she had truly appreciated the cheese. The next morning, Andrew found himself watching the driveway with uncharacteristic anticipation. Would she return as promised? And if she did, should he acknowledge that he knew who she was? To his surprise, Emma arrived earlier than expected, this time driving a more subdued black SUV. She was dressed similarly to the previous day, in practical clothes with the now familiar cap and sunglasses. "Good morning," she called as she approached the barn where Andrew was working. "I hope it's not too early." "Been up since 4:30 a.m., Andrew replied with a shrug. "Cows don't recognize weekends or sleep-in days." Emma smiled, removing her sunglasses now that they were away from the road. "I brought bagels and more coffee. I thought we could talk about that business proposition over breakfast." Andrew accepted the offering, then gestured toward the farmhouse. "We should talk inside." The farmhouse kitchen was clean but Spartan, reflective of a man living alone and focusing on essentials. The furnishings were old but well-maintained, with a large oak table dominating the space. Family photos lined one wall, chronicling generations of Bennetts on the farm. Emma gazed around with interest as Andrew prepared plates for the bagels. "This house has character," she observed. "So much history." "Built in 1892 by my great-grandfather," Andrew confirmed, setting the plates on the table. The original section was just 2 rooms. Each generation added on as the family grew. They settled at the table, the morning sunlight streaming through the east-facing windows. Before Emma could launch into her proposal, Andrew decided to address the elephant in the room. "So, Emma Porter," he said calmly, watching her expression shift from relaxed to startled. "I have to admit, I didn't recognize you at first." Emma froze, a mixture of emotions crossing her face before settling into resignation. "You looked me up last night," Andrew confirmed. "I was curious about this actress who suddenly wanted to invest in my farm." Emma set down her coffee cup, her posture changing subtly. Gone was some of the casual ease, replaced by a more guarded demeanor. "Does this change things?" Andrew considered the question seriously. "I'm not sure yet. It depends on why you're really here, and what you're really proposing." Emma took a deep breath, removing her cap and running a hand through her hair in a gesture that seemed unconscious. Without the disguise, and in the clear morning light, she was unmistakably the woman whose face had launched blockbuster films and graced countless magazines. "I wasn't being dishonest about why I'm here," she began. "I genuinely came to Vermont seeking space away from my normal life. The wrong turn onto your farm was accident, but everything since has been genuine." "Including the business proposal?" Andrew pressed. "Especially that," Emma insisted, leaning forward. "Andrew, I spent 15 years in an industry that's all smoke and mirrors, playing characters in manufactured stories. The success has been beyond anything I dreamed of, but the cost has been my connection to anything real." Her expression was so earnest that Andrew found himself inclined to believe her, despite his natural skepticism. "For the past few years, I've been looking for an investment that means something," she continued. "Not just financial returns, but something that creates value in the world. When I saw your farm, when you taught me to milk Bessie, when I tasted that incredible cheese, I recognized something authentic that deserves Dashan to be preserved." "And turning it into a tourist attraction preserves it?" Andrew questioned, still not entirely convinced. "Not a tourist attraction," Emma corrected firmly. "An educational farm stay. A place where people can disconnect from screens and reconnect with the source of their food, where they can learn traditional skills from someone who embodies those traditions." She gestured toward him. "From you." Andrew took a sip of his coffee, organizing his thoughts. Even if I believed your intentions are genuine, there's the practical reality. 30 days isn't much time to save a farm, even with Hollywood money behind it. That's the first thing we'd address, Emma said, shifting into what Andrew recognized as a more businesslike demeanor. I can provide the capital to pay off the immediate debt and stop the foreclosure. That buys us time to implement the larger vision. And what exactly would this partnership look like? Andrew asked, still cautious, but increasingly curious. Emma pulled a tablet from her bag, bringing up what appeared to be preliminary business plans. I've had my financial team working on potential structures. The simplest would be a 50/50 partnership. I provide the capital investment to clear the debt and fund improvements. You provide the land, the secretary, expertise, and ongoing operations. Your financial team knows about this? In general terms, Emma clarified. They know I'm exploring an agritourism investment. They don't know the specific property or that I've been learning to milk cows. A small smile played at her lips. That would raise too many questions. Andrew studied her for a moment. Why the secrecy? Why the disguise? If this is a legitimate business interest. Emma's expression clouded slightly. My life isn't entirely my own. Every move, every decision becomes public fodder. Emma Porter buys failing farm would be headlines before the ink dried on any agreement. Photographers would descend, locals would be harassed for quotes. And any chance of developing something authentic would be compromised from the start. End quote. Andrew could understand that logic, even if the reality of such scrutiny was foreign to his experience. And eventually, if we did this, your involvement would become public knowledge at some point. Eventually, yes, Emma acknowledged. But on our terms, when the foundation is solid. I'd want the focus to be on the farm, the experience, the education, not on my celebrity. The conversation continued through a second cup of coffee as Emma outlined her vision in more detail. She envisioned renovating the old hay barn into luxury guest accommodations that maintained rustic charm while providing comfortable amenities. The main farmhouse would remain Andrew's private residence. The dairy operation would continue, with guests able to participate in daily chores if they chose. The cheese production would be expanded, with classes offered to visitors. Additional activities could include bread making in the original brick oven, horticulture in restored kitchen gardens, and traditional crafts taught by local artisans. The target market would be upscale urbanites seeking authentic disconnection, Emma explained. People who would pay premium prices for the experience and the knowledge. We'd keep it small and intimate, focusing on quality over quantity. Despite his initial skepticism, Andrew found himself increasingly drawn to the vision she described. It would preserve the working farm while adapting it to economic realities. The dairy herd would remain, the land would still produce, but the business model would shift to something potentially more sustainable. If we did this, he said carefully, I'd need assurances that the farm remains a working agricultural operation, not just a backdrop for tourists' photos. Absolutely, Emma agreed eagerly. That authenticity is the entire point. Without that, it's just another country retreat. And my role? I'm a farmer, not a tour guide or hospitality manager. You'd continue to be a farmer first and foremost, Emma assured him. We'd hire staff to handle the hospitality aspects. Your role would be to share your knowledge, your skills, your connection to this land. That's the value you bring that can't be replicated or manufactured. Andrew nodded slowly, considering. I'd want certain provisions in any agreement, protections for the land, commitments to agricultural preservation. Of course, Emma said. I wouldn't want it any other way. Look, I know this is sudden and probably overwhelming. I'm not asking for an answer today. Take some time to think about it. Consult with your own advisors. I'm prepared to put the offer in writing, with all the protections and specifics you need. End quote. For the first time in years, Andrew felt a glimmer of hope about the farm's future. It wasn't the future he had envisioned, but it might be a future nonetheless, one that honored the past while adapting to present realities. I'll need to talk to Jason and Karen, he said finally. Whatever happens to this place affects them too, even if they're not here anymore. Emma nodded understandingly. Of course. Family matters. She hesitated, then added, would it help if I spoke with them too? Explained the vision? Andrew considered this. Maybe. Let me talk to them first. They finished their breakfast, the conversation shifting to more practical matters about the farm's current operations and what immediate improvements might be needed. Emma asked insightful questions that revealed she'd done significant research on agricultural tourism since their first meeting. As they were cleaning up, Emma's phone chimed with a text message. Checking it. She grimaced slightly. My assistant. I have a conference call I can't miss in an hour. Hollywood calling? Andrew asked with a slight smile. Emma nodded ruefully. The real world intruding. I'm technically on a break between projects, but there are always details demanding attention. As she prepared to leave, Emma turned to Andrew with unexpected seriousness. Thank you for being willing to consider this, and for not. She gestured vaguely at herself, making a big deal about who I am. Celebrity doesn't count for much in milking parlors. Andrew replied with a shrug, though the truth was, he had been making an effort to treat her normally despite the surreal situation. Cows don't care if you've won Golden Globes. Emma laughed, the sound genuine and unrestrained. That's exactly why I need this place, she said, more to herself than to him. See you tomorrow? Same time? I'll be here, Andrew confirmed. I always am. After Emma left, Andrew spent the morning doing chores with a mind spinning with possibilities. The practical farmer in him remained cautious, aware that even well-intentioned plans could go awry, especially when involving someone from a world so different from his own. But another part of him, a part that had nearly surrendered to despair, whispered that this might be not just a lifeline, but an opportunity to reimagine the Bennett farm for a new era. That evening, as promised, Andrew called his ex-wife. Their conversations were usually brief and focused on arrangements for Jason's visits. But tonight, he needed to discuss something more significant. You're considering a partnership with Emma Porter? Karen's disbelief was evident even over the phone. The Emma Porter? Andrew, are you sure this isn't some kind of scam? It's really her, Andrew confirmed, understanding his ex-wife's skepticism. She stumbled onto the farm by accident last week, been back 3 times now, and she just happened to offer to save the farm? Karen's tone remained dubious. Andrew explained the situation as clearly as he could, including Emma's stated reasons for seeking the investment and her vision for transforming the farm into an educational retreat. It sounds amazing, Karen admitted once he'd finished. But so unlikely. Hollywood celebrities don't just wander onto failing dairy farms in Vermont and offer partnerships. I know how it sounds, Andrew agreed. I can hardly believe it myself. But she seems genuine. And honestly, Karen, what do I have to lose? The bank's getting me 30 days before foreclosure? The sharp intake of breath told him this was news to her. 30 days? Oh, Andrew, I'm so sorry. The sympathy in her voice touched him unexpectedly. Despite their separation, she understood what the farm meant to him, to their family history. I'm going to talk to a lawyer tomorrow, he told her. Get some professional advice before proceeding. But I wanted to tell you first, get your thoughts. This affects Jason too. I appreciate that, Karen said. And for what it's worth, if this is legitimate, I think you should consider it seriously. The farm as it was isn't viable anymore. We both know that. But this way, at least something of what made it special could continue. They talked a while longer, Karen asking practical questions that helped Andrew clarify his own thinking. By the time they hung up, he felt more confident about exploring the proposal further. The next step was contacting his son. Jason was less surprised than his mother had been. Emma Porter? The one from those superhero movies? He asked. That's actually pretty cool, Dad. Andrew had to smile at his son's perspective. To a 16-year-old, the celebrity aspect was the most interesting part of the story. Yes, that Emma Porter. But that's not the important part. The important part is what happens to the farm. Is she going to be there when I visit this summer? Jason asked, ignoring his father's attempt to focus on practicalities. I don't know yet. Nothing's been decided, Andrew replied. I'm just exploring the possibility. How would you feel about the farm changing, becoming partly a place where people come to stay and learn? There was a brief silence as Jason considered this. Would we have to move out of the house? No, the house would still be ours. The old hay barn would be converted for guests. And we'd still have the cows? Yes, the dairy operation would continue. That's the whole point, for people to experience a working farm. Jason seemed to be processing this. So basically, you'd get to keep the farm, keep doing what you love, but also have enough money to not be stressed all the time? Andrew was struck by his son's perception. He sometimes forgot how observant Jason was, how aware he had been of the financial strain even as a young boy. That's the hope, yes. Then I think you should do it, Jason said with the straightforward certainty of youth. And I'll help when I visit. I could show city kids how to use the equipment. I'm pretty good with the tractor now. The simple offer of support warmed Andrew's heart. I'd like that, Jace. Thanks. The following day, Andrew met with Peter Calloway's son, Michael, who had left farming to become an attorney specializing in agricultural law. Michael listened carefully to the unusual proposition, his initial skepticism giving way to thoughtful consideration. It's unorthodox, he admitted, but not without precedent. Agritourism is a growing sector, and farm stays at premium prices have proven successful in several regions. The celebrity connection adds complexity, but also potential marketing value. I'm less concerned with the business model than with protecting the farm itself, Andrew explained. If we do this, I need guarantees that the land stays agricultural, that the operation remains authentic. Michael nodded, making notes. We can structure the agreement with covenants regarding land use, agricultural practices, even succession planning. The key is balancing your priorities with her investment expectations. By the time Emma returned the next day, Andrew had a clearer sense of how to proceed. They sat again at the kitchen table, this time with Michael present to help navigate the more technical aspects of a potential partnership. I've consulted with my own legal team, Emma explained, and they've provided some standard frameworks for joint ventures of this nature. But I want to emphasize that I'm open to modifications that address your specific concerns, Andrew. Over the next several hours, they outlined the broad strokes of an agreement. Emma would provide the capital to clear the existing debt and fund the initial renovations. Andrew would contribute the land and buildings, valued appropriately to establish his equity stake. The partnership would be structured as a 50/50 ownership, with specific provisions about operational control, agricultural practices, and future bull development limitations. What about your public involvement? Andrew asked. At some point, your connection to this place will become known. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I propose a phased approach. Initially, my investment would be through a holding company, with my personal involvement kept private. As the operation stabilizes, we can strategically reveal my connection, using it to generate attention, but always keeping the focus on the farm experience, not on me. Michael raised important questions about liability, insurance, zoning requirements, and other practical matters. Emma's responses revealed that she had indeed done extensive research and consultation with experts in rural development and agricultural tourism. There's one more thing, Emma said as they were wrapping up the discussion. I'd like to bring in a documentary filmmaker, someone I trust, to capture the transformation process. The story of saving a generations-old family farm by reimagining its future. I think it could be powerful. Andrew's immediate reaction was hesitation. I'm not comfortable being on camera, being the focus of that kind of attention. You wouldn't be the focus, Emma assured him. The farm would be, the process would be, and we would have complete control over the final product, over how it's presented and distributed. The documentary idea became a sticking point, with Andrew reluctant and Emma surprisingly insistent. Eventually, they tabled the discussion for future consideration, focusing instead on finalizing the main agreement. By the end of the week, the preliminary partnership agreement was drafted. Andrew read through it carefully with Michael, making sure he understood every provision, every commitment. It was a leap of faith, but one with careful safeguards built in. The farm would remain agricultural. The dairy operation would continue, with improvements rather than downsizing. His home would remain his own. And most importantly, the Bennett legacy would continue, albeit in an evolved form. In early May, exactly 2 weeks after Emma had first stumbled onto the farm looking for directions, they signed the agreement. The first order of business was addressing the bank loan. True to her word, Emma's financial team arranged for the full payment of the outstanding mortgage, removing the immediate threat of foreclosure. The relief Andrew felt was profound, almost physical in its intensity. For the first time in years, he went to bed without the crushing weight of impending failure pressing on his chest. The farm was secure, at least for now. The future was uncertain but full of more possibility than he had allowed himself to imagine in a very long time. The next phase began almost hummerade. Immediately, architects visited to assess the hay barn's potential for conversion to guest accommodations. Sustainable agriculture consultants evaluated the dairy operation, suggesting improvements that would maintain traditional practices while increasing efficiency. Marketing experts began developing concepts for promoting the farm-stay experience without explicitly mentioning GR. Emma's involvement. Through it all, Emma remained surprisingly hands-on, visiting the farm regularly despite her other commitments. Her disguise became a familiar sight around the property, though they were careful to maintain her anonymity when contractors or consultants were present. "You don't have to be here so often," Andrew told her one afternoon as they walked the property, discussing potential locations for outdoor activities. "I'm sure you have more important things to do than watch barn renovations." "That's where you're wrong," Emma replied with unexpected seriousness. "This is the most meaningful project I've been involved with in years. Being here, seeing it take shape, that's not an obligation. It's what's keeping me sane between publicity appearances and contract negotiations." Andrew studied her as she gazed across the fields. There was a tension in her that seemed to ease only when she was on the farm, away from the pressures of her public life. He was beginning to understand that her investment wasn't merely financial or even philosophical. It was personal in a way he hadn't initially grasped. "Why this?" he asked finally. "Of all the things you could do with your resources, why save one small dairy farm in Vermont?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather was a farmer," she said eventually. "Nothing as established as this, just a small operation in Iowa. He lost it during the farm crisis in the 1980s. I was too young to really understand, but I remember the day we had to leave. The way he looked back at the barn as we drove away." She paused, her expression distant with memory. "He never recovered from that loss, took factory jobs, moved to the city, but the light had gone out of him. When I started making real money, I always thought I'd try to buy back that land for him, but he died before I could. Cancer, probably from all the chemicals he'd worked with over the years." Andrew had not expected such a personal connection. It explained much about her passion for the project, her insistence on maintaining the agricultural integrity of the operation. "I'm sorry about your grandfather," he said simply. Emma nodded. "This won't bring him back, or restore what our family lost. But maybe it can prevent another family from experiencing that same loss. And maybe it can help reconnect people to where their food comes from, to the value of what, quote, farmers do." The conversation shifted something in their relationship, moving it from a careful business partnership toward a more genuine understanding. As the weeks passed and spring gave way to early summer, they developed a comfortable working rhythm. Emma's expertise in presentation and communication complemented Andrew's practical knowledge of farming. Their different perspectives often led to creative solutions to the challenges they encountered. By late June, the hay barn renovation was well underway. The structure was being carefully preserved, while the interior was transformed into 4 luxury suites, each with a different agricultural theme. The dairy operation had received targeted upgrades, including improved milking equipment that was more efficient, while still allowing for traditional hand-milking demonstrations. The cheese production facility had been expanded, with a new aging room and teaching space for workshops. Marketing materials were being developed, focusing on the authentic farm experience without revealing Emma's connection. The name they settled on, Bennett Heritage Farm, emphasized the multi-generational history, while the tagline, reconnect with the source, captured the experiential focus of the operation. Jason arrived for his summer visit just as the most intensive phase of construction was beginning. Despite his initial excitement about meeting Emma Porter, he quickly became more interested in the transformation of the farm itself. Emma, for her part, treated him not as an awestruck fan, but as a valuable team member with unique insights into the property and its history. "Your dad tells me you're good with the tractor," she said on Jason's second day. "Think you could show me how it works? I've never operated farm equipment before." The request delighted Jason, giving him the opportunity to demonstrate expertise to someone he admired. Andrew watched with amusement and a touch of pride as his son patiently explained the controls to one of Hollywood's highest-paid actresses. The moment crystallized something Andrew had been feeling increasingly over the past weeks. This unlikely partnership, born of chance and desperation, was evolving into something genuine and potentially transformative, not just for the farm's economic prospects, but for the human connections it was fostering. That evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset color the sky above the newly renovated barn, Emma brought up the documentary idea again. "I still think there's a powerful story here worth capturing," she said. "Not just for marketing purposes, but as a record of what's possible when traditional agriculture adapts without abandoning its core values." Andrew had been reconsidering his initial resistance. Seeing the care with which Emma had approached every aspect of the partnership, he had developed a trust in her judgment that would have seemed unimaginable just months ago. "If we did this," he said carefully, "I'd need assurances about control of the final product and about when and how your involvement becomes public." Emma nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. Full approval rights on the final cut. And we'd plan the revelation of my connection strategically, focusing on the project rather than on celebrity involvement. And Jason would need to approve his inclusion," Andrew added, always protective of his son's privacy. "Of course, nothing would be used without explicit consent from everyone involved." They discussed the documentary concept in more detail, Emma explaining her vision for a thoughtful exploration of agricultural heritage and innovation rather than a reality TV-style production. By the end of the evening, Andrew found himself cautiously agreeing to move forward with the idea. The filmmaker, a woman named Sophia Kim, whom Emma had worked with on a previous project, arrived in early July. Sophia's approach was unobtrusive, often filming from a distance or setting up static cameras to capture the daily rhythms of farm life without interrupting the work. When she did conduct interviews, her questions were thoughtful and focused on the farm's history and future rather than on Emma's celebrity. "We're documenting something important here," Sophia explained to Andrew after their first formal interview. "The disappearance of family farms is a national crisis that most Americans are barely aware of. Your story, this partnership, it offers a potential model for preservation through adaptation." As July progressed, the project continued to take shape. The guest accommodations were nearly complete, furnished with a careful balance of rustic charm and modern comfort. The upgraded cheese facility was operational, with Andrew producing larger batches of his artisanal products for local restaurants and specialty shops. A small farm store had been added near the entrance, offering cheese, fresh dairy, and other local products to day visitors. Marketing had begun in a targeted, low-key manner, reaching out to specific influencers in the sustainable food community and luxury travel sector. Without explicitly mentioning Emma's involvement, the materials emphasized the authentic farm experience, the multi-generational heritage, and the opportunity to disconnect from digital life while reconnecting with agricultural traditions. The response was encouraging. Several food writers and sustainable agriculture advocates expressed interest in visiting, and a handful of reservations came in for the soft opening planned for September. The focus on quality over quantity, on intimate experience rather than mass tourism, seemed to be resonating with the target audience. Throughout this period, Emma maintained her disguise when on the property, though it became something of an open secret among the core team working on the project. Her visits became less frequent in August as pre-production began on her next film, but she remained closely involved through video calls and regular updates. The first significant test of their concept came in late August when a food writer from a prestigious national magazine visited to profile Bennett Heritage Farm as part of a feature on agricultural tourism. Andrew, initially nervous about media attention, found that his passion for the farm and its history flowed naturally as he guided the writer through the property. "The goal isn't to create a theme park version of farming," he explained as they toured the dairy operation. "It's to offer an authentic window into where food comes from, the labor and care that goes into it, the connection to land and animals that industrial agriculture has largely lost." The writer seemed genuinely impressed, particularly with the cheese facility and the thoughtful way the guest accommodations had been integrated into the existing farm structure. The article, when published a few weeks later, was glowingly positive, emphasizing the educational aspects of the experience and the preservation of agricultural heritage. Significantly, there was no mention of Emma Porter. The partnership had been described simply as a collaboration between the fourth-generation farmer and a private investor with family connections to agriculture. The focus remained exactly where they had wanted it, on the farm itself, its history, and its reimagined future. The soft opening in September exceeded their modest expectations. The 4 guest suites were booked for the 2-week trial period, occupied by carefully selected visitors including sustainable food advocates, travel writers, and potential partners from the culinary world. The guests participated in farm activities at various levels, from observing morning milking to trying their hand at cheese-making under Andrew's guidance. "I've never understood where my food comes from at such a fundamental level," one guest, a prominent chef from Boston, commented during the farewell dinner of the first week. "This experience has transformed how I'll think about dairy, about farming, about the entire food system." Such responses validated the core concept. Visitors were connecting with the agricultural experience in meaningful ways, gaining insights that would travel with them back to their urban lives and professional practices. The premium pricing structure was proving viable, with several guests already inquiring about returning or sending friends. As September gave way to October, and the fall colors transformed the landscape, Andrew found himself reflecting on the extraordinary changes of the past 6 months. The farm that had been weeks away from foreclosure was now not just solvent, but thriving in a new incarnation. The dairy operation continued, with improvements rather than reductions. The cheese production had expanded, with products now featured in several high-end restaurants in Boston and New York. Most importantly, the Bennett legacy continued, the connection to the land maintained while adapting to new realities. Emma's visits had become less frequent as her film commitments intensified, but their partnership remained strong through regular calls and messages. She had become more than a business partner, evolving into a friend whose perspective Andrew valued even beyond their shared project. The documentary filming was nearly complete, with Sophia capturing the successful soft opening and the transition into regular operations. The question of when and how to reveal Emma's involvement was becoming more pressing as interest in the farm grew and bookings for the spring season began to fill. "I think it's time," Emma said during a video call in late October. "The foundation is solid now. The farm's identity is established on its own merits. We can reveal my connection without it overwhelming everything else." Andrew agreed. The operation had proven itself independently, gaining recognition for its authentic experience and educational value. Emma's celebrity could now serve as an amplifier rather than a distraction. They developed a careful strategy for the revelation. The documentary would be completed and submitted to several prestigious film festivals. As part of the festival promotion, Emma would publicly discuss her involvement in the farm, explaining her personal connection to agricultural preservation and the value she found in the partnership. The plan was set in motion with the completion of the documentary, titled Reconnection, Reimagining the Family Farm. Sophia's final cut was a thoughtful exploration of the Bennett farm's history, the economic challenges that had threatened its existence, and the innovative partnership that had preserved it while adapting it to Dashan. Contemporary realities. Emma and Andrew watched the finished film together in the farmhouse living room, a fire crackling in the original stone fireplace as November winds blew outside. The documentary skillfully captured the essence of what they had created, emphasizing the educational aspects, the preservation of agricultural knowledge, and the potential model for other struggling family farms. "It's perfect," Emma said as the credits rolled, wiping away unexpected tears. It honors the history while celebrating the innovation. That's exactly what we wanted to achieve. Andrew nodded, moved by seeing the past 6 months of transformation captured so effectively. Sophia understood what this place means, what we're trying to preserve. The documentary was accepted by the Sundance Film Festival, providing the perfect platform for revealing Emma's involvement. The announcement generated immediate media interest, with requests for interviews and features flooding in from major publications and television programs. Emma handled the publicity with characteristic grace, consistently redirecting attention from her celebrity to the agricultural mission of the project. In interviews, she emphasized her grandfather's farm history, the crisis facing family farms across America, and the educational aspects of Bennett Heritage Farm. "This isn't a vanity project or a hobby farm," she explained during a high-profile television interview. "It's a working agricultural operation that happens to also serve an educational purpose." Andrew Bennett is a fourth-generation farmer with incredible knowledge that deserves to be preserved and shared. "My role has been to help create an economic model that makes that possible in today's challenging agricultural environment." End quote. The revelation of Emma's involvement did bring a surge of attention to the farm, but the careful groundwork they had laid ensured that the focus remained on the agricultural experience rather than celebrity spotting. Booking requests increased dramatically, allowing them to be selective about guests and to maintain the intimate, educational nature of the experience. By the following spring, Bennett Heritage Farm had become recognized as a model for innovative agricultural preservation. Industry publications featured case studies of their approach. Agricultural colleges sent students to learn about their operational model. Other struggling family farms reached out for guidance on similar transformations. For Andrew, the most meaningful change was more personal. The constant financial stress that had dominated his life for years had lifted, allowing him to rediscover his passion for farming and cheesemaking. The educational component had awakened a talent for teaching that he hadn't known he possessed, as he guided visitors through the mysteries of animal husbandry and dairy production. Karen and Jason visited during April school break, staying in one of the guest suites despite Andrew's offer of the farmhouse. Jason proudly showed his mother the improvements, the new operations, and especially his own contribution, a hands-on program for younger visitors that he had helped develop during his summer stay. "I hardly recognize the place," Karen said, as she and Andrew walked the property one evening. "Not the physical changes, though those are impressive. It's the energy, the purpose. This farm feels alive again." Andrew nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "For years, it felt like I was just delaying the inevitable, fighting a losing battle. Now there's a future here, something worth building toward." "I'm happy for you, Andrew," Karen said sincerely. "You deserved better than watching everything your family built slip away. This partnership with Emma, it's brought back the man I remember, the one with dreams and plans instead of just worries." The observation touched him deeply. Their marriage hadn't survived the darkest period of the farm's struggles, but there was healing in this new chapter, a vindication of his refusal to give up on his heritage despite overwhelming odds. Emma's visits remained sporadic due to her filming schedule, but she arranged her commitments to allow extended stays at the farm between projects. During these periods, she shed her celebrity persona entirely, working alongside Andrew in the daily operations and participating enthusiastically in the educational programs. "You know, you've gotten pretty good at this farming thing," Andrew observed as they finished the morning milking during one of her stays. "You're not half bad with Bessie anymore." Emma laughed, wiping her hands on her work jeans that were now appropriately worn. "High praise indeed from a Bennett. I'll have to put that on my resume. Can milk a cow without embarrassing myself completely." Their friendly banter had become a comfortable feature of their relationship, a balance to the more serious discussions of business operations and future planning. They had developed a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose, transcending the unlikely circumstances of their initial meeting. The documentary premiered at Sundance to critical acclaim, winning the Audience Award for Documentary Features. Its subsequent limited theatrical release and streaming deal brought the story of Bennett Heritage Farm to a national audience, generating discussion about the crisis in family farming and potential models for dumb array. Preservation. 1 year after Emma had first stumbled onto the farm looking for directions, Andrew stood in the renovated barn watching a group of visitors learn the fundamentals of cheesemaking. The space had been transformed with state-of-the-art equipment alongside traditional tools, embodying the balance of heritage and innovation that defined their entire operation. Emma joined him, having just finished guiding another group through the morning milking routine. In her work clothes and with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she looked more like a farmer than a Hollywood star, a transformation that seemed to bring her genuine joy. "Pretty amazing what a wrong turn can lead to," she said quietly, watching the engaged expressions of the visitors as they worked with the fresh curds. "Seems like you ended up exactly where you needed to be," Andrew replied. Emma smiled, her expression peaceful, in a way it rarely was in her public appearances. "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something real, something that matters beyond entertainment or distraction." "What we've created here, it does matter," Andrew agreed. "It's preserving more than just one farm. It's preserving knowledge, connection, understanding of where food comes from, and what it takes to produce it." They stood in companionable silence, watching as the visitors exclaimed over the transformation of liquid milk into solid cheese, experiencing the small miracle that Andrew had witnessed thousands of times but never press. Lost appreciation for. "You know, my grandfather would have loved this place," Emma said after a while. "Not the luxury accommodations or the celebrity connection, but the essence of it. A working farm that continues, that adapts without surrendering its soul." Andrew nodded, understanding completely. "That's what my father always feared most. That the farm would disappear entirely. That the knowledge accumulated over generations would be lost. This way, it continues. Different, but still true to its roots." As they walked out into the April sunshine, the Vermont landscape vibrant with spring promise, Andrew reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. A chance encounter had led to an unlikely partnership that had saved not just his farm, but something larger. A piece of agricultural heritage that might otherwise have been lost. The barn where Emma had first clumsily attempted to milk Bessie now stood at the center of an operation that honored tradition while embracing change. That preserved rural knowledge while making it accessible to those who had lost connection to their food sources. Together, they had created something neither could have achieved alone. A model that offered hope not just for Bennett Heritage Farm, but potentially for struggling agricultural communities across the country. As they reached the crest of the small hill overlooking the farm, they paused to take in the view. The red barn with its fresh paint, the fields beginning to green with spring growth, the grazing Holsteins including Bessie, now the matriarch of the herd and a favorite with visitors. It was a scene that could have been from a century ago, yet it existed firmly in the present, adapting to survive in changed conditions while honoring its deep roots. "Sometimes I still can't believe how all this happened," Andrew said, gesturing toward the bustling farm below. "If you hadn't made that wrong turn, if you hadn't been patient enough to teach a clueless city girl how to milk a cow," Emma added with a smile. "I think about that moment a lot," Andrew admitted. "You were so determined, even when the milk went everywhere except the bucket." Emma laughed, the sound carrying across the open fields. "I was terrible. But there was something so real about it, so fundamentally honest. Success or failure depended entirely on technique and patience, not on who I was or what I'd accomplished elsewhere." She paused, looking out at the land with an expression of deep contentment. "That feeling, that connection to something authentic, it's what I was searching for without even knowing it." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a small group of guests, led by Jason, who had returned for another weekend visit. At 16, nearly 17 now, he had grown taller over the past year, and his confidence had blossomed through his involvement with the farm project. Andrew felt a surge of pride seeing his son explain the seasonal planting schedule to the attentive visitors, his knowledge both accurate and delivered with natural enthusiasm. "He's got a real gift for this," Emma observed quietly. "The teaching aspect, connecting with people." Andrew nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. "Karen says he's talking about studying sustainable agriculture in college. 2 years ago, he couldn't wait to get away from farming, saw it as nothing but hard work and failure. Perspective changes everything, Emma replied. Now he sees the value in what you've preserved, the importance of the knowledge you're passing on. As the sun began to lower toward the western hills, casting the farm in golden afternoon light, the day's visitors departed and the regular rhythms of farm life resumed. The evening milking needed to be completed, the cheese room cleaned and prepared for the next day's production, the animals fed and settled for the night. Emma and Andrew walked back down the hill together, falling into the easy partnership they had developed over the months. There was comfort in these routines, in the necessary tasks that anchored them to the reality of agricultural life, beyond the educational aspects or business considerations of their venture. "Will you stay for dinner?" Andrew asked as they neared the farmhouse. "Jason's heading back to his mother's tonight, but I was planning to grill some of that grass-fed beef from the Peterson farm." "I'd like that," Emma replied. "I have a video call with my agent at 9, but dinner would be perfect." Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Andrew began preparing the meal while Emma set the table, moving around the space with familiar ease. The formality of their early interactions had long since given way to comfortable companionship, a friendship rooted in shared purpose and mutual respect. As they ate on the back porch, watching the last light fade from the sky, their conversation turned to future plans for the farm. The initial concept had proven successful beyond their expectations, with bookings solid through the coming year and interest growing steadily through word of mouth and carefully managed media coverage. "I've been thinking about expansion," Emma said, taking a sip of local wine. "Not bigger, necessarily, but broader in scope. Educational outreach to schools, maybe a scholarship program for young farmers, partnerships with agricultural education programs." Andrew considered these ideas. A year ago, he had been focused solely on survival, on preventing the immediate loss of the farm. Now, with that threat resolved, he found himself thinking more expansively about legacy and impact. "I've been corresponding with some other family farmers who are interested in our model," he shared. "There's potential to create a network, to share resources and knowledge, to help others adapt without losing their agricultural identity." "I love that idea," Emma said enthusiastically. "What if we created a foundation, a formal structure to support family farm preservation through innovative economic models?" The concept took root and blossomed as they discussed possibilities, their complementary perspectives, enriching the emerging vision. Emma brought her understanding of media, public engagement, and foundation structure, while Andrew contributed his deep knowledge of agricultural challenges and the practical needs of family farmers. As darkness settled fully over the farm, they moved inside, continuing their conversation by the fire. The spring evening still carried a chill, and the original stone fireplace remained the heart of the farmhouse, as it had been for generations of Bennetts. "This feels right," Emma said quietly, gazing into the flames. "Using the success we've created here to help others face the same challenges. It completes the circle." Andrew nodded, understanding what she meant. Their partnership had saved one farm, but the crisis facing family agriculture was national, even global in scope. Expanding their impact, sharing the model they had developed, represented a natural evolution of their work together. "From wrong turn to foundation," he mused. "Quite a journey." Emma smiled, the firelight catching the warmth in her eyes. "The best journeys are the unexpected ones." As she prepared to leave for her video call, Emma paused at the door. "Oh, I nearly forgot to tell you. The New York Times wants to do a feature on the farm for their Sunday magazine. They're particularly interested in the educational component and the potential replicability of our stock model." "Another interview?" Andrew asked with a slight grimace. Despite the past year's exposure, he still found media attention somewhat uncomfortable. "This one's important," Emma replied. "Their readership includes policymakers, potential partners, people who could help scale what we're doing to help other farms. But I told them I'd have to check with you first." The consideration touched Andrew. Despite her own comfort with media attention, Emma had always respected his more private nature, never pushing him into publicity he wasn't comfortable with. "If you think it will help the larger mission, then I'm in," he decided. It's not just about us anymore. Emma's face brightened with approval. That's exactly it. It's bigger than Bennett Heritage Farm now. Bigger than either of us. After she left, Andrew sat alone by the fire, reflecting on her words. It was bigger than them. This partnership that had begun with a wrong turn and a clumsy attempt at milking. It had grown into something neither of them could have envisioned. A model that preserved agricultural heritage while creating economic viability, that honored tradition while embracing innovation. The following morning, Andrew rose before dawn, as he had every day of his adult life. The routines of the farm continued, regardless of new ventures or expanding visions. Cows needed milking, animals needed feeding, the daily cycle of agricultural life proceeded with its own timeless rhythm. As he walked to the barn in the gray pre-dawn light, Andrew was struck by the continuity of his actions. His great-grandfather had walked this same path, had begun each day with the same purpose. The land had endured through generations, through hardship and prosperity, through change and consistency. Now, against all odds, it would continue, not just as a working farm, but as a center for education, for preservation of agricultural knowledge, for innovation in sustainable farming practices. Inside the barn, the cows shifted in their stalls, their familiar presence comforting in its constancy. Bessie greeted him with a gentle nudge, her large brown eyes seeming to hold generations of bovine wisdom. Andrew ran a hand along her side, appreciating the simple, direct connection to another living being that farming provided. As he began the morning milking, the eastern sky lightened with the promise of another day. Andrew Bennett, fourth-generation farmer and unlikely business partner to one of Hollywood's brightest stars, felt a deep sense of rightness settle in his chest. The past year had brought changes he could never have imagined, challenges he would never have chosen, and opportunities he would never have found alone. The farm would continue, different yet the same, adapted yet authentic. And in that continuation was everything that mattered: the preservation of knowledge, the stewardship of land, the passing of agricultural wisdom from one generation to the next. Emma's wrong turn had indeed led exactly where it needed to go, creating a path forward not just for Bennett Heritage Farm, but potentially for family farms across the country. As the first golden rays of sunrise touched the red barn, illuminating the buildings and fields that had been his family's legacy for generations, Andrew smiled. The day's work awaited, the visitors would soon arrive, and the story of this place, his place, would continue to unfold in ways both rooted in the past and reaching toward the future. In that balance, in that blend of heritage and possibility, lay the true success of their unexpected partnership. That evening, as a new group of visitors gathered in the renovated barn for a welcome dinner, Andrew stood to address them. These moments had grown easier over the months, his initial discomfort with public speaking giving way to a quiet confidence in the value of what he had to share. "Welcome to Bennett Heritage Farm," he began, looking around at the attentive faces. "For over 100 years, this land has been worked by my family, producing milk and cheese, connecting to the seasons, understanding the relationship between soil, animals, and the food that sustains us all." Among the guests, he noted a young couple from Boston, a family with teenage children similar in age to Jason, a food writer from California, and several others who had come seeking something they couldn't find in their daily dasa. Urban lives. The fact that this farm still exists, that it continues to operate as a working dairy, is something of a miracle in today's agricultural economy, Andrew continued. Family farms like this one are disappearing at an alarming rate, taking with them generations of knowledge and a way of life that connects us directly to our food sources. He paused, his gaze moving to the doorway where Emma had appeared, choosing to join the welcome dinner rather than keep her scheduled video call with her publicist. She nodded encouragingly, and Andrew felt a surge of appreciation for this partnership that had transcended its unlikely beginnings. Bennett Heritage Farm survived because of adaptation, because of a willingness to embrace change while honoring tradition, he told the guests. During your stay with us, you'll experience both the timeless aspects of dairy farming and the innovations that make it viable in today's world. You'll milk cows both by hand and with modern equipment, You'll make cheese using methods my grandmother taught me, alongside new techniques that improve quality and safety." End quote. The guests listened with evident interest, some taking notes, others simply absorbing the atmosphere of the historic barn now transformed into an elegant dining space that retained its authentic agricultural character. Most importantly, Andrew concluded, "I hope you'll leave with a deeper understanding of where your food comes from, of the labor and knowledge that goes into producing it, and of the importance of preserving agricultural heritage even as farming evolves to meet contemporary challenges." End quote. As the meal was served, featuring products from Bennett Farm and neighboring agricultural operations, Andrew joined Emma at the main table. The conversation flowed easily, with guests asking thoughtful questions about farming practices, rural economics, and the story of how the farm-stay concept had developed. "Ms. Porter," the food writer asked, addressing Emma directly, "what drew you to invest in agricultural tourism, specifically? It seems quite different from your other ventures." Emma smiled, exchanging a brief glance with Andrew before responding. "It began with a wrong turn, actually. I was lost, looking for directions to my accommodations, and ended up at this farm. Andrew was kind enough to help me, and somehow the conversation turned to his cows. She insisted on learning to milk Bessie." Andrew had it with a chuckle. "Made a complete mess of it, but was absolutely determined to get better. It was the most real thing I'd done in years," Emma explained, her tone sincere despite the light-hearted exchange. "In my regular life, everything is so managed, so disconnected from direct consequences. Here, success or failure was immediate and honest. That cow didn't care who I was or what I'd accomplished elsewhere." The guests smiled, clearly charmed by the story of the chance encounter that had led to such an unlikely partnership. But beyond the personal connection, Emma continued more seriously. "I recognized the value in what was at risk of being lost. Not just this specific farm, but the knowledge it represents. The connection to food production that most of us have lost entirely. Supporting the preservation of that knowledge, making it accessible to others seeking reconnection. That aligned perfectly with my desire to create meaningful impact with my resources." End quote. The explanation resonated with the guests, several of whom nodded in understanding. They represented exactly the demographic Emma had identified in her initial proposal: urban professionals seeking authentic experiences, connection to food sources, and temporary escape from digital saturation. As dinner progressed, Andrew observed the interactions around the table. The conversation had moved beyond the celebrities to the substance of what they were creating, the educational value, the agricultural preservation, the model that might be replicated to help other struggling family farms. This, he realized, was the true success of their partnership. Emma's celebrity had opened doors and attracted attention, but the substance of what they had built together stood on its own merits. Bennett Heritage Farm was not famous because a movie star had invested in it. It was recognized for pioneering an approach to agricultural preservation that maintained authenticity while creating economic viability. Later that night, after the guests had retired to their accommodations in the renovated hay barn, Andrew and Emma sat on the farmhouse porch, enjoying the quiet that settled over the property after the day's activities. "I canceled the call with my publicist," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Some things are more important." Andrew nodded, understanding the significance of this choice for someone whose career demanded constant attention to public perception and professional opportunities. "The foundation idea we discussed yesterday?" "Exactly," Emma confirmed. "I've been thinking about it nonstop. This model we've created, it has such potential to help other farms, other agricultural communities, but it needs structure, funding, expertise to scale effectively." They spent the next hour outlining conceptual framework for what would eventually become the Agricultural Heritage Foundation, an organization dedicated to preserving family farms through innovative economic models that maintained authentic agricultural operations while creating additional revenue streams through education and experiential tourism. "This could be your legacy," Andrew observed, as their planning session wound down. "Far more lasting than any film." Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful in the soft porch light. "Our legacy," she corrected gently. None of this would exist without your knowledge, your connection to this land, your willingness to adapt without compromising what matters most. The collaborative spirit that had characterized their partnership from the beginning infused this new venture as well. Emma would provide the initial funding and the connections to potential donors and media platforms. Andrew would contribute the agricultural expertise and the lived experience of transforming a struggling farm into a viable educational center. Together, they could create something with impact far beyond the boundaries of Bennett Heritage Farm. As spring gave way to summer, the foundation took shape alongside the continuing operations of the farm. Legal structures were established, mission statements crafted, outreach programs developed. The documentary, now widely available on a major streaming platform, served as both proof of concept and recruiting tool, attracting interest from struggling farmers and potential philanthropic partners alike. Jason returned for his summer stay, this time bringing 2 friends from school who were interested in sustainable agriculture. Andrew watched with pride as his son confidently guided his peers through the daily operations, explaining both traditional techniques and innovative approaches with equal facility. "You've become quite the teacher," Andrew observed one evening as they finished the daily chores. "You remind me of my grandfather showing me the ropes when I was about your age." Jason smiled, the comparison clearly pleasing him. "I've been thinking a lot about that actually, about continuity, about carrying knowledge forward." He hesitated, then added, "I want to study agricultural science and business at the university. Learn the scientific side to complement the practical knowledge you've taught me." The declaration caught Andrew by surprise. Despite Jason's increased engagement with the farm over the past year, he had assumed his son would pursue other interests for his education and career. "You're serious about this?" "Completely," Jason confirmed. "What you and Emma have created here, it's important, not just for our family, but as a model for preserving agricultural heritage while making it economically viable. I want to be part of expanding that impact." Andrew felt a complex wave of emotion wash over him. Pride in his son's maturity and vision, gratitude that the Bennett legacy would continue in some form, and a profound appreciation for how the partnership with Emma had transformed not just the farm's prospects, but his family's connection to their heritage. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said simply, placing a hand on Jason's shoulder. "I know I am." As the summer progressed, the first cohort of farmers interested in implementing similar models visited Bennett Heritage Farm for an intensive workshop on agritourism development. 10 family operations from across New England, all facing economic challenges similar to what Andrew had confronted a year earlier, spent a week learning about the practical, financial, and marketing aspects of creating educational farm stays. Emma took a break from pre-production on her latest film to participate in the workshop, sharing insights about effective communication, brand development, and creating authentic experiences that resonated with urban visitors. Her presence added star power to the program, but her contribution went far beyond celebrity, offering genuine expertise developed through her involvement with Bennett Farm's transformation. The workshop participants, initially somewhat starstruck by Emma's involvement, quickly focused on the substantive knowledge being shared. These were practical farmers facing real economic threats to their livelihoods and family legacies. They asked pointed questions, raised valid concerns, and engaged deeply with the material being presented. On the final evening, as the group gathered for a farewell dinner in the barn, one of the participants, an elderly apple farmer from Massachusetts, stood to offer a toast. "To Andrew and Emma," he said, raising his glass of local cider, "for showing us that adaptation doesn't have to mean abandonment, that innovation can preserve tradition rather than replace it. You've given us more than a business model. You've given us hope that our family legacies can continue." The simple words captured the essence of what they had created together. As Andrew looked around the table at the farmers who represented centuries of combined agricultural knowledge, he felt the weight and meaning of what had begun with a wrong turn and a clumsy attempt at milking. That night, walking back to the farmhouse under a sky brilliant with stars, Emma expressed a similar sentiment. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? If I hadn't gotten lost that day, if you hadn't been patient enough to teach me to milk Bessie?" I try not to dwell on might have beens, Andrew replied, his natural pragmatism showing. But yes, the randomness of it all is pretty remarkable. 1 year ago, I was weeks away from losing everything. Now, we're helping other farmers find a path forward. From one farm to a movement, Emma mused. That's what I find most fulfilling about all this. The potential scale of impact. They had reached the farmhouse porch, where they often ended their days in conversation when Emma was staying at the farm. The routine had become comfortable, the time to reflect on the day's activities and plan for future developments. The foundation received another major donation today, Emma shared as they settled into the familiar chairs. A tech billionaire who grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. He visited last month and connected deeply with what we're doing. That's the third major donor this month, Andrew noted with satisfaction. The model is resonating with people who have the resources to help scale it. It's the authenticity, Emma said. People with means are hungry for meaningful impact, for investment that preserves something valuable, rather than simply generating financial returns. The foundation's rapid growth had surprised even them, attracting support from diverse sources including agricultural organizations, environmental groups, and wealthy individuals with personal connections. To farming heritage. The initial goal of helping 10 farms in the first year had already been exceeded, with 15 family operations now in various stages of implementing adapted versions of the Bennett Heritage Farm model. I received a call from the Department of Agriculture today, Andrew mentioned, still somewhat amazed by the connections that had developed. They're interested in creating a pilot program based on our approach, potentially providing grants to family farms for similar transitions. Emma's eyes widened. That would be incredible. Government support could help scale this far beyond what we could achieve through the foundation alone. It's all because of that wrong turn, Andrew said with a smile. And your terrible first attempt at milking. Emma laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet farmyard. I've gotten much better, I'll have you know. Bessie hardly complains at all anymore. Their easy banter reflected the friendship that had developed alongside their business partnership. Despite their dramatically different backgrounds and life experiences, they had found common purpose and mutual respect that transcended the unlikely circumstances of their initial meeting. As autumn painted the Vermont landscape in brilliant reds and golds, Bennett Heritage Farm hosted a harvest festival that brought together local agricultural producers, food enthusiasts, and families seeking for an connection to rural traditions. The event, organized in partnership with neighboring farms, showcased traditional harvest practices alongside innovations in sustainable agriculture. Andrew found himself at the center of it all, demonstrating century-old techniques for pressing cider, preserving vegetables, and preparing for winter on a working farm. The knowledge passed down through generations of Bennetts now flowed outward to eager learners, preserving cultural heritage that might otherwise have been lost. Emma moved through the festival more anonymously, her simple farm clothes and cap providing sufficient disguise among the bustling crowds. She participated in activities, assisted with demonstrations, and engaged with visitors as just another member of the farm team rather than its famous co-owner. During a quiet moment between demonstrations, Andrew found her sitting on a hay bale, watching children participate in a corn-shucking contest with evident delight. "Enjoying the festival?" he asked, taking a seat beside her. "Immensely," Emma replied, with genuine enthusiasm. "This is exactly what we envisioned, isn't it? Education, preservation, connection to agricultural heritage, all wrapped in an experience that's both meaningful and enjoyable." Andrew nodded, surveying the scene with satisfaction. The festival represented everything they had worked to create over the past year, the perfect embodiment of their shared vision for Bennett Heritage Farm. "I have news," Emma said after a moment, her tone shifting to something more serious. "I've been offered the lead role in a major film project, shooting in New Zealand for 6 months starting in January." The announcement shouldn't have been surprising, given Emma's continuing career as one of Hollywood's most sought-after actresses, but Andrew felt an unexpected pang at the thought of her extended absence. Over the past year, despite her other commitments, she had been a regular presence at the farm, fully engaged in its operations and evolution. "That sounds like an amazing opportunity," he said, genuinely happy for her success, even as he recognized the implications for their partnership. New Zealand is beautiful, I've heard. It is, Emma confirmed. I filmed there once before, but I'm conflicted about being away from the farm, from the foundation, for so long. We're at such a crucial stage of development. The concern touched Andrew deeply. A year ago, Emma Porter had been a stranger who accidentally turned onto his farm road. Now, she was a trusted friend and partner whose commitment to their shared venture was clearly genuine. The foundation has a strong team now, he reminded her. And the farm operations are stable. Technology makes distance less of an obstacle than it used to be. Emma nodded, though she still seemed troubled. I know, logistically it can work, but I've come to care deeply about this place, about what we're building together, being so far away for so long. She trailed off, then asked directly, do you think I should take the role? The question caught Andrew off guard. Emma Porter asking a dairy farmer for career advice seemed absurd on the surface. Yet he understood that she valued his perspective, his grounding in practical reality that balanced her more expansive vision. I think this partnership has always been about balance, he said carefully. About honoring different aspects of who we are and what we contribute. Your acting career is a fundamental part of your identity, just as this farm is part of mine. Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful. So, that's... It's a don't forget who you are while you're helping others remember who they are, Andrew clarified with a slight smile. The foundation and the farm will be here when you return, and technology really is remarkable these days. We can continue our planning sessions virtually. Relief washed over Emma's features. Thank you. I needed to hear that. Sometimes I worry that I'm diluting my commitment by maintaining my other career. Quite the opposite, Andrew assured her. Your success in that world is part of what makes our work here possible, not just financially, but in terms of visibility and influence. The platform you've built helps amplify what we're doing with the foundation. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the festival activities continue around them. Children laughed as they participated in traditional harvest games. Adults engaged in earnest conversation about food production and sustainability. Locals and visitors alike connected through shared interest in agricultural heritage. When I was at my lowest point, about to lose the farm, Andrew said reflectively, I couldn't have imagined any of this. Not just the financial rescue, but the sense of purpose, the feeling that what's been preserved here matters beyond our family. From a wrong turn to a movement, Emma mused, echoing her earlier observation. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with getting completely lost. As winter settled over Vermont, blanketing the farm in pristine white snow, Bennett Heritage Farm entered a quieter season. The guest accommodations remained open for weekend retreats, focusing on winter aspects of farm life, from planning the spring planting to traditional food preservation techniques. Emma departed for New Zealand in early January, but her presence remained felt through regular video conferences and the continuing work of the foundation she had helped establish. The physical distance did nothing to diminish her commitment to their shared vision or her engagement with the farm's ongoing evolution. Andrew settled into winter routines, focusing on maintenance projects, planning for spring improvements, and developing new educational programs for the coming year. Jason visited during school breaks, bringing fresh ideas and youthful enthusiasm that energized the colder months. In February, nearly a year and a half after Emma's wrong turn had brought her to the Bennett farm, Andrew received an unexpected letter. It came not by email or text, but through traditional mail, a thick cream envelope with his name and address written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a note from Emma, sent from her location shoot in New Zealand. Dear Andrew, it began, the formal salutation a departure from their usually casual communications. As I sit on the other side of the world, watching the sun rise over mountains so different from our Vermont hills, I find myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey we've shared since that afternoon when I couldn't find my way to the lodge. What began as a simple wrong turn has evolved into the most meaningful project of my life. A partnership that has preserved not just one farm, but potentially dozens through the foundation's work. I've been thinking a lot about wrong turns lately, about how the unexpected detours often lead us exactly where we need to go, though we could never have planned the route. My career has taken me around the world, brought acclaim and opportunity beyond anything I could have imagined as a young actress. But it was getting lost on a country road in Vermont that led me to what I needed most, a connection to something real, something authentic, something that matters beyond entertainment or distraction. Thank you for your patience that first day, for not sending the lost tourist on her way, but instead sharing a glimpse of your world, your knowledge, your connection to the land that has sustained your family for generations. Thank you for being willing to reimagine that heritage when it was threatened, for seeing potential in an unlikely partnership that has preserved something precious. The work we've begun together through Bennett Heritage Farm and the Agricultural Heritage Foundation represents what I hope will be my most enduring legacy, far outlasting any film or accolade. The preservation of agricultural knowledge, the connection between people and the sources of their food, the continuation of family farming traditions through adaptive innovation. These are contributions of lasting value. I look forward to returning to Vermont in the summer, to seeing how the farm has evolved, to continuing our work together. Until then, please know that though I am physically distant, my commitment to our shared vision remains as strong as ever. With deepest appreciation for wrong turns and second chances, M. Andrew read the letter twice, moved by its sincerity and by the articulation of what their partnership had come to mean. The simple wrong turn that had brought Emma Porter to his failing farm had indeed become something neither could have envisioned, a collaboration that transcended their different worlds to create something of lasting significance. As he looked out the window at the snow-covered fields, at the red barn where Emma had first attempted to milk Bessie, at the land that had sustained 4 generations of his family and would now continue to nurture future generations both of Bennett's and of visitors seeking connection to agricultural heritage, Andrew felt a profound sense of gratitude for wrong turns and the unexpected journeys they sometimes begin. The farm would continue, different yet the same, adapted yet authentic. And in that continuation was everything that mattered,